Hi, I'm Non Stanford, 2013 World Triathlon Champion and 2022 European Champion, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go.
Welcome to episode 348 of the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Polar's stunning new generation running watches, the Polar Pacer and the Polar Pacer Pro, and Pogo Physio's online telehealth consultations. I'm Brad Beer, sports and exercise physiotherapist by trade and training and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week, we'll bring you the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your physical best. And of course, we do this across a range of different episodes, interest editions, expert editions, featured performers, learn-ins, catch-up episodes. On today's episode, you are in for a real treat with British Triathlon star Non Stanford sharing on her career highs, lows, and learn-ins. Now, at the time of recording, Non is just 1 to 2 weeks away from drawing a curtain on her stellar professional triathlon career. By way of sporting bio, Non Stanford was the 2013 World Triathlon Series Champion and bookended with that result in 2022, just months before Non's final professional race. Non became the European Triathlon Champion. 2 weeks prior to that, Non picked up a silver medal representing Wales in the mixed teams triathlon at the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games. And across Non's professional triathlon career, Non was a 13 times medalist on the World Triathlon Series Circuit, taking line honours in World Triathlon Series races such as Hamburg, London and Madrid. More recently, Non is transitioning into an assistant coaching role with British Triathlon at the Leeds Triathlon Centre. And having known Non personally for several years now, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more affable, generous and better ambassador for sport and all that it brings to the life experience than Non. So enjoy this conversation with Non Stanford. Non Stanford, welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's exciting to be here, and as a long-standing listener and fan of the show, it's a privilege to be here speaking with you.
Well, Non, it's a timely time to record a featured performer episode with you. Your long-standing, amazing career is soon to have the curtain drawn on it, with just one competitive race left on your itinerary, and that's the final round of the 2022 Super League Triathlon Series in Neom.
Yes, I know it sounds quite strange actually to be sat here and hearing those words that it is finally my last race, the last race of my career, and feels very surreal. I'm ready for retirement and to transition and to be on the other side, but equally it's been my whole life for so long, and I think it's going to be a big adjustment period going from being an athlete performing to being on the sidelines and supporting. On the sidelines
supporting piece there, Non, it's great to see your talents and skills and experiences being translated into a coaching role there with British Triathlon. I think that's super exciting, and I think, having known you for several years, you'll be amazing in a role like that.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And hopefully. I'm really excited to be working with British Triathlon. I'm the assistant coach now at the Leeds Triathlon Centre, which is headed up by Rhys Davey, who is Vicky Holland's husband, but also her coach, and coached her world title and Olympic medals. So, it's exciting to be working alongside Rhys. And, obviously we have a huge pool of talent here in Leeds, and I feel very privileged that I've been entrusted to work with these athletes and hopefully support the future generation of athletes coming through, and hopefully pass on some knowledge that I've gained through my years of racing, at a high level, and help them, steer their careers and maybe avoid some of the mistakes that I made. But just sort of give back, I guess, to the sport that I've been so fortunate to benefit from over the years. You
said something really interesting then on the mistakes that you've made. Looking back on your career, almost there with the curtain drawn on it. But what mistakes do you feel you've made through your career?
I think most athletes will have to put their hands up and say that their careers haven't been flawless. And I think my biggest mistakes have probably been pushing too hard, trying to do too much, not listening to my body all the time, and, asking too much of it, really. And I think those are definitely sort of the areas where I've struggled the most, and sort of finding that fine line between, obviously, as an elite athlete, you have to push your limits and find where your limits are. But, it's really important to be smart and train smart and listen to your body. And I've always really struggled to find that line, I guess. And I've learned over the years and sort of definitely got better at it, but I've never mastered it. That is probably my biggest downfall.
I think it's an ongoing skill that I don't think truly ever gets mastered, but it's also the definition of high performance sport, isn't it? Walking that fine line between optimizing performance and flirting with injury risk at times.
Yeah, 100%. It's the game we play as athletes, and in any sport, the art of high performance is balancing all those things and keeping yourself healthy and getting to a start line in the best shape possible without being overdone or underdone. And sport is a science, but it's also an art. And I think it's finding the balance between those two things.
And your non-foundation story, you didn't necessarily grow up aspiring to be a triathlete, but can you take us back to your first start in the sport and how that all played out?
So I started triathlon when I was about 19. I was studying at the University of Birmingham, and I'd originally gone to the university because it had a big reputation as a cross-country and athletics university, and I spent my whole teenage years running and doing athletics, cross-country, a bit of road running, and so that's sort of where my aspirations were when I was 16, 17 and looking at university. But unfortunately, I struggled with injury through my whole sort of first 2 years at the university, and sort of looked to the triathlon team as a way of cross-training while I couldn't run as much. I'd swam as a youngster with the local swimming club and thought that maybe if I could get in the pool with the triathlon team and sort of maintain a bit of fitness that way, that would be great. And I guess before I knew it, triathlon wasn't actually my sport. But I think it took until about 2012 for me to actually turn around and say, yeah, I'm a triathlete now. Because up until that point, I think I was a runner who was doing triathlon just to keep fit.
So 2012 was the turning point, and it was such a turning point for triathlon worldwide with the London Olympics. The crowds at the Olympic triathlon drew, obviously the success of British Triathlon there with the Brownlee brothers. And can you recall what you were doing for that race? Were you at the park watching live, or where were you?
Yeah, I was definitely at the park watching live. I watched both the women's and the men's race. And, at the end of the day, I was training alongside, especially Alistair and Johnny in the whole build up to 2012. I was very, very lucky to have been training with them for about a year going into that race. And we were there supporting, and the atmosphere was just unreal. And I think it's anything I've ever experienced since. And I don't think it'll ever be experienced again in triathlon, maybe. Just, the crowds so deep and just chanting Brownlee the whole 2 hours that they were racing. It was just incredible. And I get goosebumps now thinking about it. And it wasn't even for me, I was just another spectator in the crowd at that point. And it was really special. And what it's done for the sport, hopefully globally, but especially in the UK, is just sort of, I think it's difficult to quantify, really. The sport really took off. The participation levels really took off. And in the UK, if anybody hears that you do triathlon, they say, oh, have you heard of the Brownie Brothers? Or do you know the Brownie Brothers? They are synonymous with triathlon in Great Britain. And I think we can credit them a lot with where the sport is at.
As a lifelong triathlon participant, been around the sport since I was a 10-year-old. In my mind, that 2012 London Olympic Games race was it's hard to beat as the race of the history of the sport. 1 million people plus, right, watching a triathlon. It's just incredible. And Non, I mean, could you have imagined standing in that crowd? You were training in the development program, the elite program at the time, leading up to 2012, but in 2016. You'd come so agonisingly close to the Olympic bronze medal with a sprint finish with your country compatriot and flatmate at the time, Vicky Holland. Could you have imagined just 4 years later that would be where you'd be?
Definitely not. I had sort of personal sort of dreams, I guess, but they were definitely just dreams back then. And I'd not shown sort of any potential of getting to that level. I was fairly new in triathlon in 2012. I think I'd only been doing it for 3, maybe at most 4 years. Pretty sure my first one was in 2009. So I really hadn't made that big step up. So within one Olympic cycle to standing on a start line Olympic Games representing Great Britain and coming so close to an Olympic medal is, it is something that I'm proud of. I'm still sort of bitterly disappointed that I came so close and didn't deliver. But now that I'm at this point in my career, I guess I can look back and appreciate a bit more that journey that I went on. I
mean, that 2016 result obviously cemented you as one of the top female triathletes in the world. And off the back of that, you really went on to have some wonderful results. If you had to, it's a difficult question because every race success means something different, I guess, at the time. But if you had to sort of pick one result, we themed this show the highs, lows and learnings, what would be the most important to you, Non, and why, out of all your successes?
I always find this question quite difficult because I think the obvious choice is probably London 2013, becoming world champion in front of a home crowd. And it was one of those title races where there was 3 of us going for the title and it was going to be decided at the grand final on that day. And it was between myself, Gwen Jorgensen and Annie Haug. And fortunately, and for a number of reasons, I came out on top that day and was crowned world champion. So obviously that's a very special memory and an achievement that I'll always be proud of. But there's another race that really stands out for me, and that's Hamburg 2019, where I won the race, and it's probably one of the most iconic World Series races to win. So that was really special, but came off the back of 2 really tough years following Rio Olympics. I really struggled mentally more than anything. I struggled to process the disappointment of the games, and that had a really big knock-on effect on my mental health. And I very nearly left the sport in 2018. And moving to Joel Filiol and his training group at the end of that year kind of saved me in more ways than one, to be honest with you. And I think standing on top of that podium in 2019 in Hamburg was probably one of the most emotional sort of races or ends to a race I've ever had, because it just sort of showed me that I still had what it took, and it was kind of the result of coming through a really dark period. Races is easy when things are going well, but winning races off the back of hard times is really hard. And I think that's probably one of the races I'm most proud of. And
it was 7 years post your first victory there. No, sorry, the mixed relay championships, you won gold in 2012 in Hamburg, but then you obviously took individual line honours in 2019. So effectively 7 years between a gold at Hamburg.
Yeah, it's a long time when you look at it like that. And I sometimes can't believe when I think back, it was 9 years ago now that I became world champion, and that just blows my mind. I think if in 2013 you'd said to me, this is the journey that's going to happen over the next 9 years, I probably wouldn't have, believed that I'd still be, or I guess now I've come to the end, but I'd have still been going, to be honest with you, because when you're that young, your 30s seems like a really long way away. But it passes so quickly. And I guess the nature of what we're doing, life moves really quickly and you never have time to stop and take stock. The time scale does not seem that long at all to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Auckland, New Zealand in 2012 when you became the junior world champion. I was racing my age category, and yeah, it's hard to believe that was 10 years ago, but time, it's a fascinating thing. You mentioned there, Non, when you shifted to Joel Filiol's daily training environment at the end of 2018, that in many ways it saved your involvement in the sport. And then you said in many ways, what reinvigorated you there? What did you learn? You know, how did it change your view of the sport and obviously instill belief and confidence to keep going in the sport?
I think the confidence thing came from Joel agreeing to take me on and agreeing to coach me. You know, I knew that he had a very select group of athletes and he only took on athletes that he believed he could help and he believed could be, you know, at the top of the sport. So I guess that gave me confidence in a way, knowing that he still believed in me and still saw potential. But the biggest thing I think was just changing environments. I'd been in Leeds since 2011, and while there was no problem with Leeds, it's a brilliant setup and a brilliant place to live and train. I personally just needed a change of scenery, a change of environment, just so that I could move on and get past sort of the demons that I had from 2016. And it just sort of gave me a fresh start, and that's exactly what I needed. And obviously a change of routine, and they say a change is as good as a holiday sometimes, and that's what I needed. I just needed a complete change and to sort of reinvent myself in a way, I guess, and reestablish myself. And I loved it. I love traveling and being on the road with the team, and it's a brilliant group of people. There's some amazing people in that squad, both as athletes and as people. And I just love my time there. And it just made me fall back in love with the sport, I guess. And I owe a lot to Joel and, the JFT crew for those few years that I spent with them.
You were there with your fiance, a few weeks shy of being husband, Aaron Royal. So I guess that was nice to share those years together as well in that environment. Yeah,
definitely. We were really, really fortunate that Joel agreed to take both of us, and we were able to live that sort of exciting adventure and lifestyle together. Aaron, at the back end of 2016, moved to, or maybe it was 2017, but he moved to Leeds and joined the Leeds Triathlon setup. So we'd been training together for a couple of years, but it was nice that we could share that change and go to Joel together. And I think we sort of both thrived in that environment. I think Aaron was more used to that lifestyle than I was, because the nature, I think, of being an Australian triathlete is that you have to spend a lot of time on the road, because you have to come over to Europe for the European summer to race and train. So he was a bit more used to it than me, and probably helped me sort of get used to that new lifestyle of being away from home and being away from the Leeds environment. But yeah, it was great fun, and it's been a bit different this year because he stayed with Joel, whereas I've returned to the Leeds setup. So we've had to manage a lot of time apart over the last year. So I'll see him at the altar, I think. I haven't seen him for weeks. So.
And obviously Aaron's, forging his path into the long course triathlon world. Was there any interest for you, Non, to potentially pursue that, or it's just not something that sits on your radar?
No, I've never really been particularly interested in going long. I love the dynamics of short course racing and the bike packs, the dynamics of racing in a bike pack. And it's just never really appealed to me. And Aaron has always said I had to try it because physiologically it probably suits me so much better. I'm a bit of a diesel engine. But the nail in the coffin for that was going to watch him race Clash Miami. And they race on a speedway in Miami. and it was honestly the dullest race I've ever watched. And it was a boiling day, and none of them looked like they were having fun. And I thought, there's no way I'm doing this. It's boring to watch, let alone race. So that was a nail in the long course coffin. I have huge respect for everybody that does it. And, I enjoy watching it and following it. But no, it's not for me.
It was a tough one to get your head around, though, Non, riding around in circles on a racetrack. But no, brilliant. Non, we obviously, as I've mentioned, and we theme it the highs, lows and learn-ins. We could assume that, you touched on the word disappointment with something coming so close to the bronze there in Rio 2016, the Olympic triathlon. We could assume that was your most challenging day, but has there been any more challenging days than that in your professional career?
Yeah, I wish I could say that was the only challenging day that I'd ever had. Of course, I think the life of an elite athlete means that you have far more challenging days than good days, or days where you're on top of the world. There's been plenty of races that I've got wrong and not done so well, and I think you remember them personally, but other people probably don't. Fortunately, a lot of other people only remember sort of the times that you've won or podiumed. But I've had to deal with a lot of injuries over the year. I've had some fairly major injuries. I tore my plantar fascia back in 2014 that put me out for the whole season. I had knee surgery at the end of 2019 that was pretty much career ending. I was told I might never run again. I know those are pretty tough, challenging times to get through. And sometimes I don't really know how I did it, but I think you just, whenever you're faced with a challenge, you do. I think as humans, we adapt and we learn and we cope and we find a way to get through it and to come out the other end. And unfortunately, I did manage to do that on all the occasions. So, it's nice to sort of now be ending my career on my terms, because I always thought I'd end my career because I got another serious injury that I wasn't prepared to rehab from and fight back from. But I feel very fortunate now, considering how my career has been, that I managed to finish this year on a high and not because I was forced to.
What a powerful exit! You've just picked up the silver medal there at the 2022 Birmingham Commonwealth Games in the mixed team relay, and then becoming European Tri Champion in Munich there just a matter of a month or two ago, just a week or two from memory after the Com Games, wasn't it? Yeah,
it was 2 weeks later. So it was an exciting couple of weeks, and definitely one that I'll some few weeks that I'll never forget. I actually, going into, I think the night before the European Champs, I texted my coach and was like, I don't know how this is going to go, because I don't feel like I've trained in 2 weeks, because obviously you tapered into the Commonwealths, because that was ultimately the A race of the year. And then big celebrations after, Wales made the podium in the mixed team relay, which was a huge, huge achievement for us. We're a very small nation. And, we managed to topple one of the superpowers of triathlon in Australia. Sorry, Brad. But, for us, that was really huge. So we definitely celebrated that. And I knew it was going to be my last Commonwealth Games. So I made sure I went to the closing ceremony, which was just 3-4 days before the European Champs. So, I went into that race with sort of, I guess, lower expectations than I'd have hoped at the start of the year. But I think I was still riding on the high of the Commonwealths and had put in a really good block of training before that. So that got me through, I think. And it was a great few weeks. And I feel like that was the nicest way to exit, really.
No pressure now for Neom to keep that winning streak going.
I definitely am not putting that pressure on Neom at all. That's just for fun.
And dealing with disappointment, you've mentioned that's been part of your career and every elite athlete's career. But what would be your top tip to athletes on how to best deal with disappointment? Obviously, it's a big question and it's always contextualised to the situation. But what would be your advice? You've just taken on some coaching reins there. A young athlete's disappointed. What would non-Stanford say to that athlete?
I always think you have to focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. I think it's really easy to be sort of consumed by, I can't run, I can't go out and do my run day. And I think you kind of have to let that go and focus on what you're actually able to do at that point. If the series is really serious, you actually can't do much activity at all, then you focus on spending time with friends and family, or focusing more energy into your studies if you're studying, or work, or some other avenue where you can sort of focus your energy and not be all consumed by the fact that you're not doing the sport that you ultimately love and enjoy doing. But if you can exercise, you focus on the rehab that you have to do, and sort of how that's going to get you to your end goal of getting back on your feet. And I think it's just taking each day as it comes, and not looking too far ahead, and putting sort of pressure on when you need to be back racing or back training by. And that's kind of what I've learned over the years, is to take each day as it comes and focus on what you can do and not what you can't.
Powerful and wise words. You mentioned rehabilitating injuries there, Non, and you also mentioned several of your more significant injuries across your career. What did you learn, or what would you reflect on now, coming to the near close on your career, around maximising the team around you, whether that's the medical team or any team, the coaching team? Like, what would be non-Stanford's top tips to get the most out of the team around you?
I think communication. So communicate with your coach primarily, and if you're fortunate enough to have a good medical team around you, be honest with them and upfront with them and communicate, because ultimately all those people want the best for you and are there to help you. And I think I'm really fortunate that I've come through a system where athletes, staff and coaches all communicate well together. And a lot of the times when I've got injured is because I haven't probably shared how I'm actually feeling with my team around me. I think it's natural, especially in endurance sport, for athletes to endure for far longer than they should, with pain or discomfort. And I often think by the time an athlete gets to a coach or a practitioner and says, I've got this pain, it's probably, a bit further down the line than it should be. So I would always encourage people, as soon as you start feeling a niggle, to, even if you just document it, in Training Peaks or whatever platform you use. And if it's documented over more than a few days, then that's when you start to think, okay, actually this is serious, or, worth looking at. So it's just all about communication and being honest with yourself as well. I'm very good at denying or not being honest with myself about how much pain I'm in, or how much something's affecting me. So I think that would have to be, my top tip, really.
No, that's really, really powerful there, Non. Communicate, be honest, act early. Do you think over your career, as you matured in years, and also obviously your athletic knowledge and insight matured as well, you became better at not deceiving yourself as much around potential signs and symptoms? I often, joke that athletes are great self-deceivers. We want to bury our head in the sand sometimes and, just push through things. But do you think you got better, more sensitive to that, to act early as you went on, versus the young and inexperienced Non-Stanford?
Yeah, I definitely think I got better. But what I did get better at was communicating, or sort of documenting. So while I was maybe still a little bit in denial about things, if I told somebody, they could help me sort of rationalize it or contextualize it, or say to me, okay, maybe you should back off. So it was using those people around me to make those sort of decisions for me and with me, so that it wasn't all on me, and where I was very good at sort of convincing myself it was fine if I told somebody else, and that burden was almost off me. And I think as athletes, we often feel guilty, don't we, if we miss a training session or take a rest day. Whereas if somebody else tells you that it's okay and you probably need to do that, then it just helps you make you feel better about yourself. So I think I got better at communicating, and relying on the people around me to or leaning on the people around me to support me through those sort of injuries and times.
You're listening to this featured performer episode featuring 2013 World Triathlon Series Champion and 2022 European Triathlon Champion, non-Stanford. Support for today's show comes from Polar. Polar believe that the most important thing you can do is listen to your heart. What Polar does helps to improve the health, fitness and quality of millions of lives around the world. And that is what drives them. But what is driving you? If you are interested in the next step in your fitness and health tracking, do take a moment to check out our friends at polar.com. If you are looking for the latest in running watches, they have the all-new Pacer range. For multi-sport, it's the Vantage V2, or if you are getting off the beaten track and need a premium outdoor GPS watch, look no further than the stunning and tough GridX Pro watches. However, if you want to get the most out of your training and racing, take a beat and grab the gold standard in heart rate monitors, the Polar H10, or for an even more flexible heart rate monitor, the Verity Sense, which also tracks your heart rate for swimming. Polar's range starts at $129, but what's most important is that whatever you are doing, do it with heart. Visit polar.com. Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio's online telehealth consultations. If you are an endurance athlete struggling with bone, tendon, or joint-related concerns, Pogo Physio's online 45-minute consultations can be an ideal means to help get you back to your physical best. You can schedule your 45-minute online appointment with myself or any of the Pogo Physio team by jumping over to pogophysio.com.au/telehealth. For now, let's jump back with non-Stanford on this featured performer episode, sharing across her career highs, lows, and learnings just prior to the curtain drawing on her life as a professional athlete. Prior to recording this with you, you had shared that you had some indicators that you felt like perhaps it's time to consider where the end of the professional career would lie. What were some of those indicators? What were you feeling, thinking, perceiving? I think it's fascinating to how does an athlete know when it really is time versus potentially selling themselves short of what they're capable of?
Yeah, it's a really difficult decision to make, but I think one of the key moments for me was pre-season, sort of coming up to the start of the season, and the younger athletes were sort of all working out, how many points they had and if they'd be able to get a World Series start this year, and they were really excited about that. As much as I, love it and have loved my time there, I could see that it meant so much more to them than it did to me. And whereas, for me, getting a World Series start was almost a given because my ranking was high enough and, I'd been performing well enough, I didn't want it as much as them. And I just thought that's probably a sign that, my time is done. And, if I don't want it as much as some of the other athletes when I stand on that start line, I can try as hard as I want, but your heart isn't all in it. And I think that was probably the real big turning point for me. I'd been thinking, considering sort of that my end of my career would be in the next few years. And I think at the end of the season last year, going into the start of the winter, I was like, oh yeah, maybe I could keep going to Paris. It's not that far away. But over that sort of winter and coming up into the start of the season, I think I really started to realise that my heart just wasn't in it anymore. And as much as I love training and I love triathlon, I just wasn't enjoying the racing like I used to. So that was the biggest factor really for me. But I also have to consider my health as well. And I've got arthritis in my knee since I had that surgery. So that's quite hard to manage. And I think when you get a bit older, you realise that there is a life after triathlon and after you've been a professional athlete. And, I want to be able to be active and still live a relatively normal life after triathlon. And, I want to stop before my body's absolutely destroyed and I need a knee replacement before 40, basically as well.
I mean, your knee injury, it was an unusual one, wasn't it? The cartilage injury in your knee. Are you at liberty to share a little bit around, what happened with your injury?
Basically, there's a section of cartilage that tore away behind my kneecap, and it was floating around within my knee. So I was getting a lot of swelling and discomfort in my knee. While we can't pinpoint the exact moment that it happened, we think it's because there was a couple of occasions when I'm racing, I jumped on my bike and the saddle dropped. So I ended up having to race 20 or 40K with my saddle slammed, which puts a lot of load through your knee, especially when you're obviously riding very hard. So that happened in Hamburg in 2019 and Bermuda in 2019. And we think that's probably what started the process, at least. So while, I'll put my hands up and say a lot of my injuries were not self-inflicted, but could have been managed better by myself. That particular one was just really unfortunate. And sort of, I guess, a technical or mechanical bike issue. It's kind of out of my hands in a way. So, it was a bit unlucky really, but led to being one of the biggest and most significant injuries of my career.
Oh gosh, but you've persevered and had some amazing results on the other side of that, courtesy of the effort you've put into your rehabilitation and the team, guiding you through it. To put listeners in perspective of what, through your peak season times, your weeks and years look like on a macro level, what did it look like? And on a micro level, what was non-Stanford doing in terms of hours, training and breakdown?
We've actually been discussing this quite a bit as a coaching team here in Leeds recently, sort of working out where, a lot of our top performers have been when they've been performing at their best compared to sort of where our development athletes are. So where, we need to get them to. And so back in 2013 when, I guess I was towards the top of, where I've been, I was regularly training 30 hours a week. I was running 9 times a week, which right now blows my mind because as I've got older, I haven't been able to maintain that or repeat that. Swimming 5 times a week and cycling 6 times a week, but cycling volume very high. So be cycling 16 to 18 hours a week. So really, really big volumes. And that's kind of traditionally the Leeds way, the Leeds approach was high volume, polarized training. I think my training has always been based around that, but the highest volumes I've ever hit were sort of back in that 2013 and probably 2015, 2016 period as well. I was back able to repeat that. So at the highest, those were kind of the volumes that we were looking at. And, I do think they work, but it's not necessarily sustainable. You never know if I'd done it slightly different, whether I'd have achieved what I achieved off that program.
Yeah, always easy in hindsight to look back and critique, isn't it? But I guess that word sustainability, it's going to look different for every athlete, even in the same daily training environment. It's that's the art and science, isn't it, of optimizing human performance?
Yeah, definitely. And I've learned that a lot over the years, training alongside different athletes. For me, the biggest example of that you can do it other ways is Georgia Taylor-Brown. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying, but she is probably one of the smartest and most sensible athletes that, I've ever had the privilege to train alongside. And she knows her body better than anybody else. And she doesn't necessarily do the high volumes. She is doing far less than I was doing at my peak now, that she's at her peak. But it's working, and it just shows that different athletes respond to different things. And I don't think I could have got away with doing what she does and had the same sort of success, but her physiology is very different. And you have to definitely individualize it and work to the strengths of those athletes.
And compared to the 30 hours you were doing at the peak of your volume and some of those career highlights, what have the last couple of seasons look like in terms of overall training hours and distribution? I
think the biggest difference is my run volume. I probably run now 4 or 5 times a week compared to 9. I would never double run now, which I was obviously doing back then. I run once a week on the levers system, which is sort of like an anti-gravity, similar to an Alter G, but it's a bit more of a transportable system, a lever system for taking body weight away and reducing the load when you're running. So I think that's the biggest change, is having to adapt to not being able to run as much volume. But saying that, I don't think my running's been impacted too much. I've still been able to run fairly well off that. But I did have the years of mileage behind me. So whether that's sort of almost banked and I'm still able to call on that, I'm not sure. But, I've still maintained a decent volume of cycling and still swum either 5 or 6 times a week, depending on what squad I was in. So, yeah, I'm probably down to more like on average, 24 to 26 hours rather than 30 plus sometimes. So.
And those extra 4 or 5 hours have allowed yourself and Aaron to plan the wedding?
Yeah. Well, myself to plan the wedding. No, to be fair, he booked the whole honeymoon, so I'll give him credit where credit's due.
Well done, Aaron Royal. Fantastic. Non, let's jump into a performance round. So this is a rapid fire series of questions. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Training session most disliked?
A hard VO2 swim.
And what might a session like that entail, Non?
Okay, for example, 2100s best pace off 130 cycle.
Pain. Training session most loved?
A long tempo run, so 60 minutes, starting at, say, 350k pace, and every 20 minutes you get faster, finishing at 330k pace. That's my favourite session.
Yeah, nice. Favourite pre-race meal, Non, across your career, what was it?
The night before, I'd always have pizza. The morning before the race, I used to always just have bread and jam, but more recently I've switched to rice with banana and honey.
It's a big change, mixing things up, Non.
Yeah, I know. That's what I had before the Europeans, though, so it works.
It's got a winning strike rate, doesn't it? Bedtime, morning time throughout your many seasons of training, Non. In general terms, what would that look like for you?
When I was in Leeds, wake up time would be about 6, because we'd always swim early in the morning, 6 to 6:30. When I was with Joel, that was probably more like 7:30 to 8, because we always started training a little bit later, a bit more on European time, and always in bed by around 10 o'clock.
Who's the athlete that non-Stanford most admires and why?
Oh, that's a really tough question. That's ever evolving, I think. But ultimately, the person or the athlete that's inspired me the most throughout my career is Dame Kelly Holmes. Very fortunate to be mentored by her growing up. And I think she was the one that instilled that belief in me from a young age that, I could potentially be a professional athlete. So
Dame Kelly Holmes. Non, who's the toughest competitor you've ever raced and why?
It's probably going to have to be Vicky Holland, isn't it? There's a video of us at the age of, 15, 16 at the British under 17 or under 20, 1500 metre championships. And she sprints past me in the final 100 metres there. So it's sort of been the story of my life, Vicky Holland out sprinting me.
And yet you're flatmates for how many years?
We lived together from 2014 to 2017, so quite a long time.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's one of triathlon's amazing little stories there, I think, but it's a great example of sportsmanship and for world sport in general. Non, has there been a mantra that you've used across your career in racing or training, like some sort of regular self-statement? I've got before 2013, that race, I sort of wrote this out, and it was, she believed she could, so she did. And I've now got that framed on my wall at home. And I think just sort of believing that you can do it. There's a big thing around psychology of actually believing you can do something before you can actually go out and achieve it. So, yeah. That's amazing. She believed she could, so she did. Non, best recovery tip?
Sleep.
Gosh.
It's the cheapest and most effective one.
Yeah, can't beat it, can you? One word to describe non-Stanford's racing style?
Ooh, hopefully gutsy.
Gutsy. We'll go with that. How would non-Stanford describe being in the zone?
For me, it's being as relaxed as possible.
And when was the last time, Non, you were in the zone?
Probably fully at Europeans.
It's nice that you got to go there one more time in the career.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And Non, final question in the performance round. We know that epic sessions alone don't make champions, but from your recollection, can you recall the hardest session you've ever done across your many years of training?
I've obviously done many hard sessions, but one of the ones that really stands out for me is It was probably in around 2013 when Gwen was starting to, and Annie actually, Gwen was really starting to emerge as, the person to beat. And also Annie Haug had this incredible sort of turn of speed in a race. So we did this session that was 5 by a K, and you had to do 400 float, 400 hard, 200 float. And they were all, it blows my mind actually thinking about it. They were all between 2:55 and 3 minute Ks. So I think we'd go through, off the top of my head, go through the first 400 in like 72, 73, drop down to about a 65, and then drop, back up to that 72 kind of pace. I'm not sure if that's 100% right, working out the numbers, but yeah, it was pretty tough session. And that was trying to prepare myself to counter the kick of those two brilliant runners.
Yeah, gosh, big day. A big day at the office, Non. Non, you're out of the performance round. Every guest of the show, Non, gets issued 2 set questions, and the first is this: if you could issue one piece of advice to help listeners of the show perform at their physical best, what would that single piece of advice be, Non? I
think for me, reflecting on my career, I think it would have to be, if in doubt, leave it out. So if you've got a bit of a niggle, or you're super tired, and you're not sure whether you should go out and do a session or go for that easy run or long ride, don't do it. It's better to take that day and be sure that you're okay to go again tomorrow rather than taking the risk and pushing on and probably causing yourself more damage.
And such a portable, easy to remember maxim, isn't it? If in doubt, leave it out. Non, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. So you can be really nice or really nasty here. What is Non-Stanford's physical challenge going to be?
My physical challenge is to do 10 minutes of strength work and mobility work a day. I think a lot of people's problems are that they're just a little bit weak or a little bit immobile, and that's what causes a lot of niggles. So I would say do 20 single calf raises, 20 ab exercises, 20 glute exercises, and 5 minutes of stretching every day. And hopefully that'll stave off, I think, a lot of people's little niggles and problems that arise.
I'm glad you mentioned calf raises, Non. On the strength and conditioning side of things, how big of a role did that play throughout your career?
Yeah, huge. I've regularly done 2 strength and conditioning sessions a week. It's something that's sort of really bought into in British Triathlon. Every athlete is in the gym at least twice a week with an S&C coach following, a structured program. But from a young age, I was actually brought up through gymnastics, and strength and conditioning is such a important part of what they do. So from a very young age, it's sort of been drilled into me how important it is to keep your body strong if you want it to perform at a high level and function at a high level.
Yeah, gosh, it is so important, isn't it? It's the 4th discipline of triathlon. Non, you've been very generous with your time and your experiences and learnings from across your career. So thank you. And it's a big time coming up for you with your final race of your professional career, NEOM Super League Triathlon Series, and then obviously the wedding. Where's the wedding taking place with Aaron Royal?
The wedding is going to be in Leeds. We're based here. We live here most of the year. So my mum was a bit disappointed it's not in Wales because I'm originally from Wales. But yeah, sort of neutral ground and hopefully easier for people to get to.
Yeah, amazing. And Non, for those that want to follow the journey that aren't yet already, of which I imagine many people are, but where will they be able to find you on Instagram? What will it be? Will it be...
Just Non-Stanford. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Follow along.
it won't change post the wedding?
No, well, yeah, you're probably going to get more wedding content than triathlon content for the next few weeks, but normal service will resume at some point, I'm sure.
No, absolutely awesome. Non, thank you for your time and your contribution.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been fun.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust and I know that you enjoyed Non's share-ins. Do jump over and follow Non on the socials. You'll find Non easily over on Instagram @NonStanford. And if you take on Non's physical challenge, do let Non know. Talking about the socials, you'll find the show over at Physical Performance Show, including video episodes of the show over on our YouTube channel. If you have feedback for the show, you'll find me over at Brad_Beer, perhaps a guest recommendation or a way that we can improve the show. A massive thank you to today's show partners, Polar and Pogo Physio's online telehealth consultations. And as always, a huge thank you to the team who make this show possible each and every week. Daryl Misson, audio engineer, Susan Wilkin, show administration, Matthew Olding, show graphic design, and Milan Borrow, show videography. Now, podcasts are free to enjoy, however, they are not free to produce. And if you'd like to practically support the production of the show, you can do so by jumping over to physicalperformanceshow.com, hitting the Patreon tab, and there you can pledge your support from just $5 per month. In return, we'll grant you complimentary access to the entire back catalogue of live stream events, including Dr. Stephen Seiler, Dr. Shona Halson, acclaimed dietitian and author Rinny McGregor, and most recently, positive sports psychology researcher Rory Darkins, who delivered a wonderful live stream on athlete well-being and positive sports psychology. So jump over to physicalperformanceshow.com and click the Patreon tab. So until next week, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.